Gotta lower the weight.
Okay, let her down a bit.
Just let you swing. I'll get him to stop the traffic and I'll go back out.
I think we can bring it right around.
Okay, the push is not gonna.
Can you hold the button there for a sec?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, you got it?
Yep. Hey everyone. So in this video I responded to a vehicle accident that took out a pole. Nothing new, happens probably once a week. But we're going to capture this entire job from start to finish. Before we get into it, I do want to bring up the Utility Expo. I went for the first time in 2023 and man, I was blown away. The sheer size of this show. It's incredible. It's one of the only shows that actually lets you get hands-on demo of the equipment, tools, and the tech that can really make a difference in your day-to-day operations. The Utility Expo 2025, it's coming up fast. I'm gonna be there all week, and I've got an exclusive code so that you guys can be there too. Use my code Aaron30 to save 30% off on your admissions to the largest trade show in the utility industry. Follow the link in the description, and again, use my code Aaron30. It's good through to August 22nd, and that's to save 30% off your admissions to the Utility Expo 2025. I hope to see you guys all there. Now, let's get to the video. So the first thing I do want to mention is that nobody was injured in this vehicle accident. Upon my arrival, the suspects have already fled the scene and phoned in to report the vehicle stolen. When I arrived, that overhead guy wire that was on the left side, kind of laying on the street, that was hanging over the top of the road quite low. All three phases were still energized. It was a bit of an emergency situation, so I wasn't able to take the time to capture any of that. So as I was responding, I did call in two other trucks, one man per truck, to start heading this way, and instructed one of them to go directly to the substation, at which point he was able to open the interrupter to isolate those three phases. And I cleared that overhead guy wire in case any high-sided vehicles came by. So once the police had the scene secure, we had the power out. The third truck that I'd phoned had traveled off into the distance to tag our protection points, and we were getting ready to take the permit. What you're looking at here now in the grass, that's needles. That's a hazard we haven't really yet encountered at a job like this. We do see them sometimes out in the field. However, this particular job site, there was literally needles everywhere. So when we had our tailboard, we actually identified that as a high energy hazard, a biological hazard. To be very wary of our steps, we took a lot of time to really comb through the area carefully and remove all the needles that were on site. The police had already thrown a couple dozen of them back into the vehicle before towing it. So at this point, we saw off in the distance there, the grounds were installed one structure away. So we are allowed to work within one span of our grounds. The reason we put our grounds one structure away is so they're not in the way of setting the pole. The pole, when it broke off, kicked over about 4 feet. So we were just looking at the hole in the ground at the existing hole, pretty much going to try and set it in the same location, but rather than using the exact same hole, that's just a shot of my partner putting the grounds on off in the distance there, checking for potential. Sorry, squirrel. But we want to keep all the wires on the broken pole. It's secure enough that we're going to set the new pole right up through the phases and transfer everything from the old pole to the new. It'll keep everything good and high off the ground. Sometimes we'll completely strip the structure, take the pole out, and set the pole with nothing in the way. So we decide to set the pole. We kind of come up with a plan here. We want to position the pole on the ground in such a way that when we're ready to set it, we don't have to swing it out to traffic. So we do have traffic control on site, a third-party company. And right here, as we're swinging it, they did stop cars for a minute, and then we get it far enough off the side that we didn't need the traffic stopped. But at any point in a job like this, if you do have to stop the traffic, don't be shy. Make sure you have communication. For this job, I actually had a radio in my pocket, so I had direct communication with the traffic control. Also, there was the overhead guy. When we have to run that over the street, we'll have to traffic stopped for that as well. So this is a 40-foot pole I believe it's 40-foot class 2, maybe a class 1. I can't remember. I probably should have checked that. But she's a long pole, hard to navigate. You can see Johnny walking off into the shrubs there. But we kept the butt over top of the back of the truck. It wasn't extending over into traffic, so we were comfortable allowing traffic to flow. And we're just going to swing this butt around, having the butt on the whole side, basically. You'll see later in the video when we do set it, we also decide that we're going to lower the winch down through the 3-phase and pick it straight up and drop it in. It's not a typical way of setting a pole. Usually you always want to have the pole and the grabber at the end of your boom to have complete control of it, but we'll see that a little bit later on in the video. So it's also, you want to, when you're moving a pole around, you want to try to grab it, I don't want to say the center because the butt of the pole is heavier than the top, but you want to grab it at the center point of gravity. It makes it a lot easier to maneuver. What we're looking at here is it's a new system for our butt grounds, and there's no copper on it, so we still had a few of them stolen, but people figured out pretty quick they were worthless. But the butt, that black butt that was on the ground, that's conductive, so it makes a real good ground grid, basically a ground on the butt of the pole, and then the ground wires attached to it. It's a mixture of metals that's, like I said, worthless to help deter copper thieves. Oftentimes you'll see during pole changeouts people using pole pullers. Situation like this where the pole was already shoved through the ground a couple feet, it's going to move pretty easy. Our only concern here was it was up against the new pole. We were a little bit scared that the pole might settle and move around as we were pulling this guy out, but we did confirm it wasn't quite touching. That bumper was still jammed into place. But yes, if anyone needs a new bumper, it's in pretty good shape, hit me up. So that pole came out really easy using nothing but our winch. Sometimes when we bring these poles back to the office, sometimes we'll bring the pole all in one big chunk, load it up on top of the truck. Sometimes we'll cut them up in manageable sizes, basically whatever's easier for us. So I'm just over here now that we get that out of the way, really checking over the site, as I mentioned, for needles. I also mentioned when we documented that as a high energy hazard, when we do our tailboard meeting, basically our pre-job discussion, what's most important when you identify all the hazards is any hazard that you identify that's of high energy, something that can cause serious harm, injury, or death. You have to have a control in place for that hazard. So an example of some hazards would be initially when I showed up that 3-phase was energized. That would be a high energy hazard. Our control for that hazard was to isolate the line, shut the power off, and ultimately install our grounds and take a work permit. For something like the needles, we did take shovels and kind of drag them through the grass and stuff, but our control for that hazard, it was an administrative control, basically, that we really drilled it into the guys' heads on site not to get careless around the work area, and definitely don't drop down on your knees when you shovel or anything. Keep your steel toe boots on, and just keep in mind, try not to work in the grassy area unless you absolutely have to. You might notice also we don't have a trailer with us. Usually we bring these poles on trailers, but this digger truck we've got, there's actually a mount on the front and back. We can set a 40-foot pole right on the mount. Pretty handy working through town. So there's just a shot of that new ground plate, the butt ground. Boys just threw a wheel chock in there so the pole doesn't roll down the hill and up onto your toe and sprain your ankle or something worse. So what Johnny's doing there now on the pole, we put staples in every foot or so on the butt ground, and then we put a molding over top of that. So you notice when you release the auger, he's keeping that boom low to the ground. So if something fails, let's say that rope breaks, you don't want that auger to drop and smash on the ground. That's another high energy hazard. So our controls for that, again, administrative controls. Whoever's lowering the auger announces to everyone, staying clear. Nobody is to stand underneath that auger. We release it, and you can see at this point here, it's pretty well sitting on the ground. Sometimes you'll see the guys put the boom straight in the air. That works as well. I generally try to keep as low to the ground as possible, so if something lets go, it's only going to fall a few feet. The struggle here now is as we extend that out, that telephone's quite low. This is a really long auger bit. I don't know how long exactly. I'm going to say up to that where you see the orange mark, you're probably looking at about 8 feet, maybe 9 feet, probably 8 feet. So when we extend that out into position, the hole, it was kind of in the ditch, so it's going to drop down a little bit. So at first we figure if we just kind of drag it through the dirt a little bit, once we get to the ditch, it's going to drop down in place. Once he starts to lift it, we kind of figure out, you know what, we're going to be just jammed up against those communication lines. So you can see them wiggling around there now. We're getting them into place. We figure once we start drilling, we might have enough clearance. Ultimately, we do decide just to remove the communication lines, lift them up, and hang them right up on the secondary. So we start digging a bit, and it's just getting pretty close. We probably still could have continued the job, but we got one of our guys up in the air now. That communication line is just on a suspension clamp. Just 3 bolts pops off the pole, off that DA machine bolt. He's going to lift that up. There's hardly any tension on that at all. 1/4 inch guy steel. There's your bumper, guys. We'll throw that in the back and bring it to the dumpster for the tow truck driver. He usually takes all the scrap pieces, but we told him he'd take that one where it's jammed in the pole. So really easy digging here. Not a whole lot of rock. In fact, that's borderline topsoil. It's a little bit wet. Oftentimes you can just shake your controls back and forth to release all the dirt off the auger. This stuff here was a little bit wet, so we had to push it off with the shovel. So this is what I mean here, where you see how the winch, the boom's up above the 3-phase. You'd never do this while energized. So we drop the winch down through, and we're going to drag the pole right up and through the 3 phases until the butt lines up the hole, and simply drop it down. I think I mentioned a few minutes ago that we had the butt closest to the pole. It was the opposite. The butt was away from the pole because we knew we were going to grab it high up. And then just a little bit of guidance through the pole. If ever you are setting a pole in live line conditions, the guy at the ground that's handling the butt of the pole must wear his class 2 rubber gloves, depending on the primary voltage, of course, but in our case it would be class 2 primary rubber gloves. So you can see there we kind of pre-planned where the hole was going to go so that we could stand it right straight up into place where it's not going to interfere with the existing wires of the cross arm. It's going to make it a real easy job to transfer. So the boys are just getting him to extend his boom and move left and right a little bit. You can see we have 2 guys perpendicular to each other. As long as it's straight from 2 perpendicular locations, 90 degrees apart, the pole is straight. It doesn't matter in line with the power lines or the driveway or whatever. 2 spots 90 degrees apart, and your pole is straight. So typically at this point we'll have 2 shovelers and a tamper. So I guess I'm doing the tamping today. Hydraulic tamper. This thing works great. It gets hot. You want to make absolute sure you have your leather gloves on when using this. You will burn your hands. Back where my right hand is. I'm waiting for my partner to flick the tool switch on. There we go. You noticed in a few shots there was a gentleman wearing a lime colored hat. So that fella right there, Mike, so he's one of our apprentices. He should be certified any day now. Very, very good apprentice. He can keep up with a journeyman any day of the week. Super lucky to have him. So we got 2 crews for this job, and then there was an extra guy also that was doing his on-call training. This is after hours, and He's doing his on-call training. It's very, very important that a pole is well tamped. This wet muck, if we weren't tamping it down, we'd have a couple wheelbarrows of extra wood. But you try to use all the mud, and then of course the pole's taking up quite a bit of the hole itself. But you see now, even with the pole taking up all that extra real estate under the ground, there's not a whole lot of leftover mud there because we tamped that real good. And that's not a good sign. That's the pole number for the communication company. That's not our pole number. So now that they're going hands on the pole, you can see we did install our cluster bars there. So again, as I mentioned, our trip grounds, they're within one span, so that is acceptable, but we still have to do our equal potential grounding bonding basically. Bracket grounds are not required in the situation where we are within about 40 meters, 35, 40 meters away from our grounds. And then we have our bonds on the pole from both poles to each other and then up to the neutral wire. So if that primary does become energized, it will carry that voltage through the neutral and energize the pole that we're working on, the area that we're working on at the same potential. So there's virtually no difference in potential regardless of what we're touching. If we got one hand on the high voltage, well, they're grounded high voltage, and one hand on the pole, and I use virtually because there is going to be some, it's not 100% accurate, as there is going to be some voltage drop, but ultimately it will be at equal potential. So that cross arm he's using, that is a fiberglass cross arm. We've been slowly implementing these into our system. Whole lot easier. They actually replace double arms. They replace 8-foot arms. There's no cross braces. There's no V braces underneath. Just 2 bolts. I wish I can remember what they're rated for, but this is a tangent arm, so it's designed to hold the weight in a tangent fashion, so the wire's pushing down towards the ground. We also have a separate design designed for dead ends, but you can see we do replace the 2 arms with the one. That one fiberglass arm is as strong as the 2 arms setup. Another great feature with the fiberglass cross arm, for those of you that saw my most recent video, Saving the Birds, when ospreys try to build a nest on the cross arm, the fiberglass ones, they just slide off all the ground, and there's not 2 arms, so they work pretty good as a deterrent for that. So the wire here, I believe it's 2-aught wire. It's not overly heavy, but boys using their equipment as opposed to wearing out their shoulders and arms and whatnot to lift those phases up. You can see there's a primary overhead guy wire that we left on the pole. That's because it was kind of holding that broken pole up. The one that was blocking traffic was down close to the telephone that I removed upon my arrival. So the first step is they're going to transfer those phases up to the pole, but also there is a slight corner on that. So I'm not sure if the boys put them on there yet or not, but they end up putting a set of come-alongs around the 2 poles. But what our plan was here, instead of making things too complicated, was, as I mentioned, the pole was tamped really well. So we're going to transfer those phases up. Again, a slight angle, probably maybe 5 or 10 degree angle. And with that overhead guy wire, we will easily be able to straighten that pole right back up into place. When we take that overhead guy wire off that old pole, it's not going to fall, because that telephone line's still attached and it's hung up against the new pole, so that's preventing that from falling to the ground. That red bag hanging that I was zoomed in on, that's just a repelling kit for a bucket rescue. If we do ever have to use a bucket rescue in a situation like this, we just use the other bucket, but it's always there if you need it. There's some videos online of some buckets catching fire and stuff. Pretty scary situation, so you do definitely want to always be prepared. Once they're done with the primary, we always try and do the primary first. This outage, it's not a huge outage. If my memory serves me correctly, it was affecting, I believe it was around 250 customers. It's big enough and there's not a whole lot of secondary work. But let's say there was a transformer bank on this pole. We would transfer up the primary, we'd surrender our work permit and stand down and energize that to get all the customers back on, except for the one local customer fed off that transformer bank. In this case, there's not a whole lot of work on the secondary, so there's not a lot of point in re-energizing that and creating that extra hazard when it's only going to take us an extra 20 minutes to finish off the structure. But once the primary is done, we can remove our bonds, our cluster bar, and the bonds across the two poles in neutral, because they will be clear and they'll remain clear from that primary. They won't be touching it at all once that's completed. But as I mentioned in many videos, before removing a bond or ground of any type, you do have to make sure that everyone on the crew is aware. You want to check with each and every person and not just assume. So that's the field phase they're bringing up now. Pretty good angle, so the boys are able to work from underneath the pole and get that last phase tied in. So our next step, before we put anything else on that pole, we're going to want to get that overhead wire transferred up. So this is the point here where you can see Johnny did add an extra set of come-alongs between the two poles. So once they remove that, it's just going to be a bit of an extra support. I mean, the pole's not going to go anywheres. If it did, it's going to fall down into the ditch, and we make sure our guys in the ground are all clear. So we've got the come-alongs in the new pole, taking some tension off that overhead. If this was energized, see the way you cut that and just let that tail swing down? You would absolutely never do that in energized conditions of any sort. But where we have a work permit, everything is de-energized. This is a very busy road, so I say that, and there's only 2 cars off in the distance, but it gets pretty busy. It's a lot of tourists in this area. So we stop traffic, everything's energized, and there's not a whole lot of weight on it, so that's why I kind of just let that cut and swing down. It's not a typical way to do things. And then we just, as I mentioned earlier, sagged up the pole, and that pulled that back straight. A lot of times we'll dismantle the top, the insulators, the cross arms, all that stuff. This case here, this is all going in the dumpster. So the easiest way is for the boys just to cut the top off, and then we'll throw that on the back of the truck. You don't want to let a pole drop to the ground like that on someone's driveway or on the road, because those insulators are porcelain. That was just falling down into some mud, so there's no issues of worrying about anything breaking. Mike was going to drag that over to the truck. Realized pretty quick it's a little bit heavier than he thought. So as any smart lineman would, he's using the equipment that he has provided to him. Use a machine. Don't wear out your back, shoulders, arms. You will definitely regret it. So the boys now finishing up. Johnny's going to take that cluster bar off here pretty soon. We've got our other fella up in the air. He's just finishing up our overhead guy wire. He's got that on an insulated rod this time, where it's up in the 3-phase. Our newer standards, a lot of the stuff you see in this video is older construction, and standards constantly evolve and change. When we run guy wires up near the primary, they're always on an insulated rod now. So that's our triplex. It's 120, 240 volt. There's 2 hots and a neutral. You can see the old spreader. It's not going to line up with the new pole. He's just going to leave that spreader right in place where there's some old crimpets and stuff in the pole and some gouges in it. There's no point in taking that out and having those bang up against the insulation. But he will tie that into a new spreader block. And that little coil of wire, that's the butt ground that we put on that had that black piece on the bottom. That's just going to bond the neutral wire to ground once that's installed. We have a multi-grounded system, so we install a ground on every single one of our poles, regardless of there being any equipment on them. Using his muscles here a little bit, you can see it's tight. What he's doing there, he's rolling it around so he gets the neutral on the bottom. If you can drop the neutral onto that top bracket, it'll fall right in place. You see that groove there? You drop that neutral, and then you only really have to muscle that one hot around the spreader block. So while he's doing that, trying to be efficient by leaving the triplex up to Johnny, and our other fellow there, he's down sagging up that guy wire that was holding up the telephone lines. So our communication companies run our overhead guy wires over top of the communications. So he wanted to get that up in place so that we didn't trap the communication line above that. So again, in that situation, we had the traffic stopped, and we did, of course, have to inspect the pole across the street as well, and there was thankfully no damage. So that's just the telephone line that's down below there now, and they're just using a 1/4 inch preform to hold that overhead guy wire in place.
As soon as Johnny gets down out of the...
We also put a tail on the guy wires if there's no insulated rod, and tie them to our butt ground. And for the communication company, they bond typically every 5th span. We'll have a piece of copper going up and bonding the main strand, the carrier for the communication lines. So you can see that the boy still left the cluster bar and the bond on the pole for 2 reasons. He's got the telephone line kind of sitting on that, and the second reason is just rather than Johnny taking everything apart and having to send that down to the ground, he just unhooks it from the neutral. It's not hurting anything down there. He'll address that once he's finished up there, which it looks like he is. He was just grabbing the crimper to make that connection. I guess the other fellow had it in his truck. You can see there's a tiny bit of slack in that overhead guy wire. When you're using a preform to secure an overhead guy wire, when you release the come-alongs, there is going to be a little bit of a buckle in the wire. So generally, once you get it exactly where you want, I'll take an extra 1 to 3 clicks on the come-alongs, and then when you release them, when the weight transfers to the preform, there will be enough slack that it should self-regulate. The tension should go back onto that overhead guy. So you can see here as he releases, that top one's shaking a little bit, and that weight is going to transfer back. And your ultimate goal is to have the weight evenly distributed between the top and the bottom guy wire. When you're attaching this butt ground, you can see sliding it away from the spreader. The reason he's doing that is if you were to hook up, let's say someone builds a house there and we run a service up to that pole, right now everything's dead. It's easy to work on. So you don't want to take up one of the good spots for that connection while everything's isolated. The real good spot to hook up right beside the spreader bar, you leave that open for if there's a new service. Nice easy spot to work on while everything's energized. So I keep saying the other fellow, that's Mitch. Up top there, when Mitch is going to start preparing the frame for the communication lines, while Johnny's going to come down here and dismantle the rest of those bonds and start dropping the rest of that pole to the ground. The big thing you got to watch for when using a chainsaw on a utility pole, the butt ground, of course, you hit that with your chainsaw and your chain is done. Secondly, once you get close to the ground, people love stapling advertisements to our poles. It's not allowed. Everyone does it as long as it's not impeding switch numbers and stuff. It's nothing more than a little bit of a nuisance. But you don't want to ram your saw through everyone's nails and staples and everything. So just keep that in mind whenever you're using a saw on a utility pole. So we're just going to cut it in small, manageable lengths so that the boys don't have to set up the boom to get rid of all the pole pieces once we get back to the office. Those bolts are all pretty old, so that's all going in the garbage. That's why it's just leaving them in the pole there. You notice nobody is standing anywhere around them working right now. Cutting that pole up, you don't want to be underneath putting pole numbers on or anything like that. Want to stay clear of the fall area.
Nice work, Johnny.
So boys are almost done. This job did not take long at all. The video was almost in real time. Obviously I had to set the camera down in a few spots, and I didn't document our initial switching in our tailboard and whatnot. And I guess a correction, we didn't chop up the whole pole. We did leave one length that is the exact length of our dumpster. We are allowed to put the old poles in our dumpster as long as they're not sticking out, so we have to cut them to length. You'll notice I'm the only one wearing a reflective vest. That's our utility provided clothing all comes with striping. That's required when we're working out on the road. I'm wearing one of the Dragonwear shirts, which I don't have any striping on this one. So that's, if anyone's wondering why I'm wearing a yellow vest and nobody else is, beneath that vest there is no striping. So I much prefer those shirts for comfort, and I find they are a bit cooler. So I generally wear those when I'm working and throw the reflective vest over top if I got to get out in the traffic or talk to a customer or something, go on a job site. So what I'm doing there, I'm keeping some tension on the winch as he rolls it up around the drum. Just if there's not tension on it, sometimes it'll bind up a little bit, and then when you use it the next time, it could jump down a few inches at a time. But we're going to leave it attached right to the pole for two reasons. So right here, we just want to make sure we don't crush our rope as it lands into place. That's what I'm keeping an eye on. But the two reasons we're leaving it on, one is it's securing our load. It's not going to go anywhere. He pulls that up tight and it kind of jams the pole in place. And also when they do get back to the office, as soon as they set up that truck with the boom, nobody needs to climb up and back. It's going to pick that pole right up with it. So we're just heading back. I'll show you guys a little bit of the switching here for the return switching at the interrupter.
We went in and got stuck with the truck there.
Oh yeah, he's no, he's good.
Go for Brad.
Yeah. Hey Brad, Aaron here. You're coming in a little scratchy. You reading me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Okay, should be good. We're done that work permit 163907 if you want to bring that up.
Yeah, 10 for 163907. I got a ringer. Go ahead.
Yeah, 10-4. So we've completed our work permit 163907 between protection points 8002 R005 and 8001 S003. All work has been completed as planned. Temporary grounds monitored and removed, and men are clear and instructed to remain clear.
Yeah, 10 for Aaron. Understand and report that you're surrendering your work for 163907 between protection points 8002 R005 and 8001 S003. All work completed as planned. I'm in the position to make clear, and all temporary grounds are bound. Thank you. 10 4.
10-4, that's correct.
Man, so when you're ready there, you can close that interrupter 8002 R005, remove that work permit tag 163907, remove that same tag number from that normal open 8001 S003 and report
10-4, Brad. You said whenever we're ready, we can go ahead and close 8002 R005, remove the work permit tag 163907, and remove that same tag number from normal open 8001 S003 and report.
10-4 there.
Sounds good, Brad. Probably 20 minutes or so.
21 out.
No, the arrow with the faded little red eye. So you'll see there's a visual disconnect that's physically going to close when he pulls down on the stick. I'll talk about that in a moment. It's gonna come down quite a bit. You might have to go to your right a little bit as you pull down. Right at the top of the screen. It's out of view right now. There you go. Just above that, you'll see that switch is now closed. So since we're using that interrupter as a protection point, there has to be a visible open point somewhere. Okay, so now we come on to the other one and you gotta remove the lock. The switch is disconnected internally, but hands on the line, you do need a visual disconnect. So that's the purpose of that switch mounted on the side.
So just push up on the lock, and that'll show your close hole. No, just go underneath and just push straight up on the lock. Yeah. There you go. Now it says ready. So now go in the close hole. Straight down. Yeah, let her go. There you go. That's it. I think this one's set at 60 seconds.
Something else I'll mention, when he was removing that lock position, when he reset it, I said no, go down below it and push it up. The reason for that is if you stick your hook in that hole and force it up, that would still work. It would still put it in the ready position. However, your hammer's stuck in a pretty small hole, so as you remove it, it could knock it back down again. When you come from underneath and push up on that lock to expose that ready flag, it's just a surefire way of getting it every time. And then depending on your settings, once you close it in, these guys are great because you can close it, and whatever the setting is, in this case, like I said, I think it's 60 seconds, you're plenty clear. And there we are, she's all closed up now. So this long day, we're out at 4 a.m. stopping to grab some lunch. I love this shot right here. This really shows the camaraderie. Everybody's smiling. We had a good breakfast after this. Thanks for stopping in, guys. See y'all soon.